Hi and welcome to Play Hooky with me. My name is Roz, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing how to create a cable knit effect using our fingers. We're going to be making a pretty cable knit pillow to get the hang of the technique, but if you're interested in making a blanket, I do have some tips at the end of the video on how to adapt the pattern. The beauty of this pattern is that it looks really complicated, but it's actually super simple to do. For this project, you'll need 2 skeins of the Bernat Blanket Big or any jumbo 7 yarn that requires a 25mm hook. Now we're not going to be using a hook, that's just a way to gauge the size of the yarn. Especially if you're using a different brand, just make sure that it requires a 25mm hook and you should be good to go. And for the pillow, I am using a 16 by 16 inch insert. To get started, we're going to create a chain of 10, and that number 10 is important for the pattern. So double check after you've created your chain that it reaches 16 inches. If it doesn't, redo it and just make your loops a little bit looser. First, we're going to create our slip knot and our first loop with the tail in the palm of your hand. Wrap the yarn around your fingers, pull the yarn through the loop, and tighten. Okay, after you've completed your first loop, create 9 more, just pulling the yarn through the loop. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And now we're going to get right into the pattern repeat, and we're going to be doing knit stitches and purl stitches. To create a knit stitch, we just pull the yarn through the back of a loop, and then to do a purl stitch, we're pushing the yarn through the front of the loop. I'll go ahead and add an insert here with the pattern. The upright circles are the knit stitches, and the sideways circles are your purl stitches. So for working row 1, we're going to do a knit stitch into the first loop, pull the yarn from behind. Next, we're going to do 2 purl stitches. So now we're going to take our yarn and press it through the front of the loop. Going in, pulling it through. So we just did our first purl. We need to do a second purl in the next loop, pushing through from the front. That's your second purl stitch. And as you can see, a purl stitch gives you a little bar in the front. Now we're going to do 4 knit stitches in the next 4 chains. So going back, behind, and pulling the yarn through. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. At this point, you should have 3 loops left to work into. 1, 2, 3. We're going to do 2 purl stitches followed by a knit stitch. So we're just replicating what we did on the other side. So purl. That's moving into the front. Another purl, going through the front. And then finally, in the very last chain there, we're doing a knit stitch. So we're taking the yarn and coming in behind and pulling it through. We're going to continue doing this until we have 5 rows. Just continue this same sequence. We've already done 1 row, so we need to do 4 more rows. Once we reach row 6, that's when we're going to start our cable. So we're beginning with a knit, 2 purls. Remember, we're just pushing the yarn through the front for the purls. Quick tip here, as you're working, try to keep your loops as consistent as possible with the size. I try to stick to about 2 inches in height. My purl stitches are also about 2 inches high, but they're covered by that little purl bump there. We've just done our 2 purls. Now it's time to do our 4 knits. 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're back to our purl stitches. Another quick tip here, keep an eye on this band of yarn as you're working. You don't want there to be a big gap between your stitches. That will make everything expand and get larger as you go if you don't keep an eye on that. So just make sure that everything's nice and close together as you create your stitches. That's one purl, two purl, and we're at our final knit stitch. I'm going to continue on now for 3 more rows, and I'll see you at row 6. I've completed my first 5 rows, and an easy way to keep track of this is to count your purl bumps. Omitting that chain here, start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm ready for row 6. On row 6, and for every 6th row that we make, we're going to be creating our cable row. And this is where we're going to be twisting our stitches to form that cable. So to begin, create your stitches just like normal. Knit, purl, purl. And now we have our 4 knit stitches here in the center. And what we're going to do is we're going to ignore the first 2 knits and work into the next 2. We're going to be crossing them over. Skipping over these 2, work into the next 2 stitches with your knits. 1 and 2. Pulling them over. Now these 2, we're going to return back to them. We're going to cross them over and create our knit stitches. 1 and 2. And you'll have something that looks like this. It looks a bit wonky now, but once we do the next row after, it'll straighten back down. And now we're just going to continue on with the sequence. We're back to our purl stitch. 1, another purl, that's number 2, and then our final knit stitch. And here we've created our first twist or our first cable. And now we're just going to repeat this sequence. We're going to do the next 5 rows just as normal, no twisting. And then when we hit the 6th row again, we're going to do another cable. So on the 12th row. So we're just going to knit, purl, purl. And now we have these little bunny ears here, and we're just going to take them in order and flatten them back down. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. 2 purls. And knit. So that's 1 row down. We need to do it 4 more times. And I'm just going to continue doing this for the next 4 rows, giving me a total of 5 normal rows, let's say. And then I will see you at row 12. And we'll do another cable together. One little tip here, when you know that you're on the row right before the cable, so row 11 for example right now, work your knits a little bit longer. This will help them cross over. It's not a have to. A lot of times I forget and it still works, but it does help. Another way to keep on track with your count is every time we do a cable row, we're going to be starting on the left side and working towards the right. Now, if you're left-handed in doing this project, you'll be going from right to left. Okay, and just like before, we're just going to start as normal. Knit, purl, purl. To work our cable, we're going to ignore and skip the first 2 loops. We'll come back to those and then work into the next 2 loops with a knit stitch. 1, 2. Pull them over. They're going to be sitting under. And now we're returning back to the first 2. Pull them over. And now we're going to create a knit stitch into these. One and 2. And then continue on as normal. We have 2 purls. 1 and 2. And a final knit stitch. And here you can see the really beautiful cable effect this creates. And now we're just going to continue this sequence until we can wrap this cover around the pillow insert. And that's going to take you about 30 rows. 15 for the front of the cover and 15 for the back. I'm just going to continue working the rows and I will see you at row 30. When you come to the end of your skein and you need to attach a new ball, there are a couple of different ways that you can do it. You can continue on just working until you get really close to running out, and then join another one with a knot. You can do the magic knot, or you can just do a regular knot, however you like to do it. And I'll go ahead and add a little link here to how to do the magic knot. Or if you don't want to have a knot in the center of your work, you can just join on the side. Bring in your new skein, start your next row just as normal, and then take those 2 tails on the side and then tie them together. You can double knot it if you like, but I prefer to just do one tie at this point. That way if I've made any mistakes and need to pull it back, I won't have any issues with that knot. And then when I get ready to seam the sides, I'll just tuck these ends in as I'm working. When you reach row 30, that's another cable row, but because we've reached the end of the cover, we really don't need to do another row of cables. So what we're going to do is just do another row for row 30 just as normal. Since we're casting off on row 30, you want to make your loops a little bit wider or longer than you normally would. This is because we're going to be working into them to cast off. So I'm making them quite wide. Continue with the row just as normal, doing your knits and your purls, but just make sure that they're a little bit longer. Next, we're going to work towards the working yarn. So here's our working yarn. We're going to start on the opposite side. And now we're just going to feed each loop one into the other. So starting with the second one, put it into the first. And then continue on, taking the second one and pulling it through the first. And then to completely fasten off, snip your yarn and thread it through that last loop. And now we're ready to do our seaming. This is super, super easy to do. Just make sure that you have 2 lengths of yarn. And then I do a little bit of extra just to be on the safe side. I like to join the loops from the inside rather than wrapping them on the outside. But you can do it however you like. There's really no science to this. I've just added it. I have a tail here that I'm going to weave in later. And now I'm just going to go back and forth working in between. Be sure that you snug this closed as you're working. This is a very dry yarn, and you can't wait till the end to kind of cinch it closed. You're just going to have to kind of do it as you work. Okay, that's one side done, and I'm going to weave in the ends later. I'm just going to move on to the second side. I'm going to do the second side, and then I'll meet you down here for the opening. I'm just going to weave these in just a little bit here. If you want added security, you can always tack it in with a needle and thread. I found that works really well with this, but I'm not going to worry about it here. This is pretty secure. This is very dry yarn, and so these fibers really hold on to each other. You can use your ends to help tighten things in little areas. And at this point, you don't even have to seam the bottom if you don't want to. You can just use this as a pillow cover and just leave it open. Or you could do a nice button, like an oversized button, and attach in a couple of places. That would be really pretty. But if you do want to add a seam, then you're just going to do the same thing. You're just going to cut 2 lengths of yarn and then seam the bottom. Again, I like to just work from the inside out. And then with the remainder, I just stuff it in there. I want to make it easy to find, just in case I want to take this off and wash it. I don't want to get too tight with this. See, it's super, super easy. To repeat the sequence and make a blanket, you'll just omit that knit stitch at the very end of the sequence and replace it with 4 knits, followed by 2 purls, 4 knits, 2 purls, all the way across until you reach the width you want to make. And then at the very end, you'll add that one last knit stitch to complete the row. I've added a graph to help you see what I mean, plus the number breakdown to create your chain. A good starting point would be a chain of 34. This is going to give you a 4-foot wide blanket. But you can use the number breakdown I've shared here to go bigger or smaller. And then for your cable rows, follow that same sequence. Do 5 rows, just the sequence, and then on the 6th row, do your twist or your cable. If you want to make your cables longer, you can do that. Just make sure that you stick to a multiple of 2. For example, you could move up to doing 7 rows with the regular sequence and then doing your cable row on the 8th, and then continue on from there. I do plan on doing a cable knit blanket video later in the summer, but I plan on doing a different pattern for that. So I just wanted to give you this option in case you wanted to do a companion blanket with this pillow. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope everything made sense. If you have any questions, be sure to let me know in the comments below, and I'll do my best to help you out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.